What's up, fight fans? Welcome to my channel. This is Johnny, and in today's video, we're going to be going over the Ring's top 5 pound for pound list, their most updated version. And what we're going to do is talk a little bit about each fighter, ranking from 5 to 1. But more importantly, I'm going to go over statistics that nobody talks about when mentioning said fighters' last 3 opponents. Guys, this is going to give us actually an educated conversation about our favorite sport regarding our favorite fighters' most recent resume. I was inspired recently by a post by a guy on Instagram who has millions of subscribers, and he was a boxing guy talking trash about one of the top 5 fighters. I won't say the fighter's name, but he was talking about their resume, calling his opponents taxi cab drivers. You guys know the jargon. And it just kind of gave me more inspiration to keep educating people on just the facts, the stats. And if you guys follow me long enough, all you'd have to do is watch some of the videos and read some of the comments regarding how triggered people get when we just state facts. In these videos, I'm doing my best not to give my opinion. And even with that, people still get triggered when you talk about just statistics. Yesterday, I'll give you a quick example. We were talking about Canelo versus Berlanga, and one of the stats I brought up was how Berlanga's first 16 fights, he had 16 knockouts all via the first round. And that's the stat. That's all I said. I didn't talk about how hard the opponents were. I didn't talk about the strength of schedule. It was specifically 16 fights, 16 knockouts, all in the first round. And the comments were crazy. Trash can, tomato can, taxi driver. And that may be the case. But my point is, I'm just here giving you facts and stats because if you really like the sport of boxing, these are conversations you're going to have with your friends when you're out at bars. And the longer I'm in the game reporting on the sport, it's going on 1.5 years now, the more I'm realizing the people who have huge followings or the people who get triggered by stats really aren't boxing fans. And this is an opinion. I feel if you're getting triggered by stats, you're just a fan of a fighter. Now, that being said, this is a channel where we are fans of the sport, and there's a big difference. And I think moving forward, we can kind of see the ones through their triggering if they're just fanboys, casuals, and more importantly, not fans of the sport. Because why wouldn't you want statistics to talk about these fighters? All right, moving forward, I'm glad I got that out the way. That was just something on my mind, and I appreciate you guys letting me talk about that. Now, the top 5 pound for pound list reads: at 5, Bam Rodriguez; at 4, Canelo; 3, Crawford; 2, Inoue; 1, Usyk. Now, whether you agree with this order, this list or not, those are the facts. And what I want to do now is just go over 5 through 1. What I've done is I'm going to give you their records. I'm going to talk about their last 3 opponents. And I just think it's significant to add up their last 3 opponents' records on the night that they fought said fighter, because this gives us a resume of sorts. It tells us what their last 3 opponents' records were and kind of gives us an idea of their competition. The reason for this is because you hear all the time about Canelo. He's fighting Berlanga. Berlanga hasn't fought anybody yet. This is his first opportunity. It's his first world title fight when Canelo has had over 20 world title fights. Those are facts. But guys, world champions can't always fight world champions. World champions every now and then have to give a guy who has never had a shot before a shot. And that's boxing. That's how this goes. So these statistics are more along the lines of the factual facts about the fighters' resumes. At 5, Bam Rodriguez, he's 20-0 with 13 knockouts. His last fight was against Juan Estrada. Going into the fight, Estrada was 44-3, knockout in the 7th. Sonny Edwards, 20-0, knockout in the 9th. Christian Hernandez, 15-1, UD in the 12th. If we add up those last 3 fights, you get a record of 79-4. We know Bam is 3-0 with 2 knockouts in his last 3. When we look at Rodriguez, what's next? He's one of my favorite fighters to watch, guys. Lower weight classes, he has knockout power. Look at 13 knockouts out of 20 fights. Now, Estrada did put in a bid for the rematch clause, so we don't know who Bam's going to fight next, but he does like to stay active, so only time will tell with Bam and who he fights next. Number 4, Canelo. Canelo Alvarez is 61-2 with 39 knockouts. We know this weekend he's getting ready to fight Edgar Berlanga, so we're using that record. Edgar is 22-0. He last fought Jaime Munguia, who was 43-0, and then Jermell Charlo, 35-1. Now, those are all sparkling records. If we add all of those up, you're going to get a combined record of Canelo's opponents on the night that they fought him. That's 101. We don't know what's going to happen in the Berlanga fight, but we know he beat Munguia and Charlo via decision. Now, when you look back and you think about Canelo's last few fights, people are going to call him cherry pickers. Fans who are fans of Benavidez are going to call him fighting his hand-picked guys. When you look at the records on paper, they are sparkly and shiny, but Berlanga was never a world champion, 22-0. Munguia was never a world champion, 43-0. Mel was, but he came up a couple divisions, who was 35-1. Now, that's just an example. A bright 101 record over his last three, but people will still find areas in that record to break apart, analyze, and talk trash about. And that's just the sport, and that's fine whether you're a Canelo fan or not. We know he's fighting this weekend, September 14th, against Berlanga. Time will tell if he can improve his record to 62-2. Also a stat I should mention, a knockout stat. I did this yesterday in our group, and I talked about Canelo hasn't had a knockout in his last 7 fights, over 70 rounds, over 1,000 days. His last knockout was against Caleb Plant, November 6, 2021. And people were hating on that stat, talking about the sport is boxing and not knockouts. I know it is, but that's just a fun stat to see. When will Canelo end his knockout drought? So if you want to know that stat, once again, it's been almost 3 years since he last had a knockout, and that was against Plant via 11th round. All right, number 3, Bud Crawford. We know Bud's 41-0 with 31 knockouts. His last fight was Israel Madrimov, who was 10-0. Errol Spence Jr. was 28-0. David Avenetian was 29-3. Guys, if we add these records up, you get a career record of 67-3 of Bud's last 3 opponents. We know that he is 3-0 in those fights. He beat Madrimov by decision, and he knocked Errol and Ava out. When you look at Crawford's resume, it's another one of these things that people who don't cheer for Bud Crawford are going to talk about him cherry picking. Who's he fighting? But when you look at Madrimov, world champion. Errol Spence Jr., world champion. Avenetian, that fight was more about, if you remember, the initial negotiations with Spence had fallen through and Bud wanted to take a fight. Then he got that deal from BOK Prime and he took it. It was December 2022, and then he went and fought EJ once the negotiations came good in July of 2023. So sometimes fighters have to take fights to stay active. Speaking of that, what's next for Bud Crawford? I did a video earlier in the week about his options, and we know at 154 those options are plentiful. Actually, he could stay there, wait for the unification fight between the winner of Zhu and Murtazailov. Maybe there's a fight with Fundora, another unified belt. Maybe he waits for the winner at 160 between Lara and Danny Garcia. That's a fun one to think about. Or maybe he gets a Canelo fight. I don't have these answers, but those are the options for Bud. Moving forward, number 2, Naoya Inoue. He's 28-0 with 25 knockouts. We just saw him fight against TJ Doheny, who was 26-4, knockout in the 7th. Louis Neary, 35-1, knockout in the 6th. Tapales, 37-3, knockout in the 10th. We add those records up over his last 3 fights, and his opponents are 98-8. We know Inoue is 3-0 with 3 knockouts in his last 3. We know the Japanese monster is one of the greatest talents of his era. His skill set, his veracity, his aggression, and his power for the weight classes is unprecedented. When we think about his resume, it's another one of these things. People did not like the Doheny fight, but Doheny was at least a world champion. And anyway, all he could do at that point is get the fighter who's in front of him out of there. Will he go up from 22 to 26? Will he wait for Nakatani to come to 22? We know Inoue recently said that the only way he fights Nakatani is if Nakatani fights his brother at 18 first. That's an exciting fight. I'd love to see Nakatani go up to 22 to fight Inoue, but a lot of the Americans think that Inoue could jump a couple weight classes up and fight Tank. I don't see that happening anytime soon, considering Inoue's size and stature. They're just built differently. We'll just have to wait to see who he takes next, but rumors are he's going to take another fight before the end of the year as well, so we'll just keep our ears open. And number 1 on the pound-for-pound list is Oleksandr Usyk, who's 22-0 with 14 knockouts. We know he has a fight scheduled with Tyson Fury in December. So we're not going to add that one considering his last fight was against Fury, and we don't want to pad that last 3 stat record. So his last fight against Fury earlier in the year, 34-0, split decision in the 12th. Dubois, 19-1, knockout in the 9th. AJ was 24-2, split decision in the 12th. You add those records up, 77 wins and 3 losses for Usyk's opponents, and he is 3-0 with 1 knockout. An interesting thing about Usyk, he doesn't get a lot of flack for winning fights, close decisions, because he came up from a lower weight class and he became the heavyweight champion of the world. And when you have that strap, you are the baddest man on the planet. But he went up to heavyweight, won a close decision against AJ split, won a close decision against Fury split. If you remember the Dubois fight, he did knock him out of there, but not without controversy. There was that low blow that was called a low blow, but man, I've watched that thing 20 times, and I still think that was a legal body shot by Dubois, and it could only be in his head. What if? You don't have to agree with me on that, but Usyk, how he carries himself, how he goes about his business, he doesn't get flack from fans. You don't hear people talking about he barely won decisions or he went up a weight class and won a split decision like you hear other fighters. So it's interesting to hear the double standards in boxing, but guys, this is the sport that we love and cheer for. If anything, after this video, hopefully you got some statistics, and more than anything, you know, when fighters are in top 5 pound for pound in the world, they're the baddest dudes on the planet. Guys, how would you change this list? Bam, Canelo, Crawford, Inoue, and Usyk. If there's any changes, that's what I want to know. Leave all that in the comment section below.